Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to Ivry and Thierry de Montbrial, who gives me such a special honor to present my personal observation concerning climate change and China. I would like to deal with three aspects in this regard. The first one is the impact of China's national conditions on its attitude to address the climate change. The second one is the basic principles China advocates to deal with climate change. The third one is the main policies and measures for China to decelerate and adapt to climate change. I begin with the first part of my presentation. So, in this regard, three phenomena deserve our attention in terms of national conditions of China and climate change. The first phenomenon is China's climate conditions are very complicated and its eco-environment is fragile. The seasonal change amplitude of air temperature of China is drastic, and the distribution of precipitation is uneven in terms of seasons and regions. The soil erosion and desertification are serious. The forest coverage is 18%, which represents only 62% of the mean level of the world. China's continental coastline is as long as 18,000 kilometers, so it is vulnerable to impact of rising of the sea level. The climate change has serious impacts to China's agriculture, animal husbandry, forest, eco-environment, and water resources. So a serious control of climate change is a need of China. It is in China's interests. The second phenomenon is China has a large population and a relatively low economy. China's population accounts for 20% of the world's total. Although total economic output of China has leaped into second place of the world recently, its per capita GDP ranks after 100 of the world. At present, the rural poverty population of the country is about 40 million. So improving people's lives is the imperative task currently facing China. That means the development of economy still remains a very tough task of Chinese government. The third phenomenon is China is in the development stage of industrialization, and the energy structure is mainly based on coal. As a developing country, China still has a long way to go in its industrialization, urbanization, and modernization. To advance further towards its development objectives, China will strive for rational growth of energy demand, which is the basic precondition for the progress of all developing countries. However, its coal-dominated energy mix cannot be substantially changed in the near future, thus making the control of greenhouse gas emissions rather difficult. So that's three conditions, national conditions of China concerning climate change. The second part of my presentation is to address climate change. Chinese government sticks to 6 following principles. First one, to address climate change within the framework of sustainable development. Climate change arises out of development and should thus be resolved along with development. It is necessary to promote sustainable development amidst efforts to address climate change and strive to achieve the goal of win-win in both. The second principle is to uphold the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, which is a core principle of the UNFCCC. Both developed and developing countries are obligated to adopt measures to decelerate and adapt to climate change. But the level of their historical responsibilities, level and stage of development, and capabilities and ways of contributions vary. Developed countries should be responsible for their accumulative emissions and current high per capita emissions, and take the lead in reducing emissions, in addition to providing financial support and transferring technologies to developing countries. The developing countries, while developing their economies and fighting poverty, should actively adopt adaptation measures, reduce their emissions to the lowest degree, and fulfill their duties in addressing climate change. The third principle is to place equal emphasis on both deceleration and adaptation. Deceleration and adaptation are integral components of the strategy for coping with climate change. Deceleration is a long and arduous challenge, while adaptation is a more present and imminent task. The latter is more important for developing countries. The two must be well coordinated and with equal stress placed on them. The fourth principle is to consider the UNFCCC and the Kyoto Protocol as a kernel mechanism dealing with the climate change. The two documents are the main programs for addressing climate change. These documents lay the legal foundation for international cooperation in dealing with climate change and reflect the common understanding of the international community. They are the most authoritative, universal, and comprehensive international framework for coping with climate change. Their status as a kernel mechanism and leading programs should be unswervingly upheld, and other types of bilateral and multilateral cooperation should be supplementary. The fifth principle is to rely on the advancement and innovation of science and technology. Technological advancement and innovation are the basis and support for tackling climate change. While promoting their own technological development and application, developed countries are obligated to promote international technological cooperation and transfer, and concretely meet their promises to provide financial and technological support to developing countries, so that the latter can get the funds needed, apply climate-friendly technologies, and build up their capacity to decelerate and adapt to climate change. The sixth principle, to rely on mass participation and extensive international cooperation. Dealing with climate change requires changes in the traditional ways of production and consumption, and the participation of the whole of the society. China is working to build a resources-conserving and environmental-friendly society, foster a social atmosphere in which the enterprises and the public participate on a voluntary basis under the guidance of the government, and raise enterprises' awareness of corporate social responsibility and the public awareness of the necessity of care for the global environment.